Hi everyone, it's Agnes Vivarelli, and today I have got another interview for you. It's from Shainna Ali. Shainna has written a wonderful book that I will show you in a minute, but I want to say welcome to Shainna. Welcome to the YouTube.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me for this discussion.
It's interesting how I came across you. One of the viewers, Martina, who is a viewer on my channel, who I have interviewed her because she's had some wonderful success. She told me about your book and she's working through it with her partner. They were both using it. And I thought I would order it. That way I could go through it myself and also then be able to recommend it to people, because a lot of the viewers on the channel are struggling with relationships, manifesting an ex back, a specific person, trying to find a new relationship. And I think the basis of getting that part right is getting this part right, which is getting your self-love foundation. So to start, can you tell us a bit about, because I saw you've got a PhD, you obviously went and did a lot of study. Can you fill people in on what you did? Like, what's your background part first?
Absolutely. I'm happy to introduce myself, but I first have to say thank you for giving a little bit of a background of how you came across the workbook and how we got to meet one another. And I have to give a congratulations to Martina. Thank you for mentioning it to you. I just think that it's lovely to hear that self-love doesn't have to occur by yourself. So whether it's Martina doing it with her partner or sharing it with you, and you also saying, well, if I'm going to help other people, then I have to help myself too. I just think that that is all of what I'm about when it comes to self-love. So thank you for sharing that first. And for everyone else, hello, my name is Dr. Shainna. I'm a mental health therapist, educator, and advocate. I am in Central Florida, where I have a private practice where I see clients for general mental health concerns, but also a predominant concern that I started seeing was the lack of self-love, which pretty much started the book. I was working with clients, I was working on my own self-love journey, but also I realized that a lot of clients dealing with mental health concerns were having concerns with self-love. And by concerns, I'll say some people were not even understanding what the term was. It wasn't even on their radar. Or some people realized that they were lacking in it. So because I saw that thread and I knew it was something I was working on myself, I started to create all of these creative methods to make it a little bit more practical, because it can be often an intimidating concept if you're starting from scratch. So that's where the workbook came from.
Wow. Well, I'm going to show people the book because it's such beautiful colors.
Thank
that's
you.
The book. And as you can see, I'm using it with my highlighter because it's really good. It's really good. I'm doing like about an hour every couple of days. I sit down for an hour and just work through it. And I've got my little exercise book and it's wonderful. Yeah.
I love that you're pacing yourself through it. You know,
yeah, very slow and steady.
Day.
Yeah.
I think that's smart of you. A lot of times I've had people ask me about the workbook saying, you know, when should I be done with it? Should it be easy? And I think something about it being a workbook makes people think that it's going to be easy. And my approach, of course, was to make it practical and approachable and feel easier than if you were to start from having no resource at all. But it's in no way an easy journey. And I'm glad to hear that you're pacing yourself through it, because you need that time to step back, reflect, allow yourself to absorb the concept and then apply it.
And also, like, you do an exercise and then the next day you go, hang on, that's made me think about other things. So you can go back and add to that before you move on to the next section. That's what I like. It's quite self-reflective.
I love that. I thank you for mentioning that. That is exactly the intention, because I actually think, you know, while I would love if someone was so enthusiastic about their journey that they finish it in 1 week, I think that's a beautiful thing. I often say if you finish it quickly, then you might want to go back to it. Actually, you may have even had this experience yourself of there's an activity you finish and then maybe you're actually a few chapters in, but you think my answer is now different from that. My experiences, and it does evolve in that way. So it's nice to take your time, but it's also nice to revisit as well.
Definitely. I think it's something you could pick up once a year and go through it again and you'd completely have a different experience.
Yeah.
I want to bring up a section that I really enjoyed.
Okay.
There was two actually that I wanted to bring up today. One, let's talk about what self-love isn't.
Oh, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, this is a good one. Can you tell me why it resonated with you so much?
Well, because I get a lot of emails about, I deserve and I should be getting, and I hear a lot of entitlement. And I was thinking, oh, this is so interesting because you've actually written a whole topic about this
Yeah.
within this chapter. And I was thinking, when I look back at my own journey, when I was in my 20s, I had a lot of that entitlement at that time, like, standing there with hands on hips. Why isn't he? And why am I not getting? And why I deserve, but not deserving from a self-loving place, doing it from that entitlement place. And I think there's definitely those two forks in the road. So that's why it resonated for those two reasons,
Yeah.
for my work and also for my own personal journey.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think that your story that you shared there aligns so well with why I added that section. So, when someone opens up this workbook, they may think, okay, I'm ready to jump in. I understand self love. Let's go. But a lot of the people who actually pick up this workbook are still very hesitant about the process, which is understandable because it's unfamiliar to them at that. So my hope in adding that section in the beginning was to make sure that we're all clear on what self-love is. And by doing that, we need to also highlight what it is not.
Yeah.
I've noticed that many times, even for myself, but also for people personally, whether it's friends and family, or professionally, whether I'm seeing clients in my counseling sessions, that a lot of us have our obstacles that hold us back from self-love. And many times it's the simple definition. And we are defining it as something that I'm not sure really qualifies as self-love. So while the definition might vary, our definitions might even be different. There are some key things that I think we make sure we don't say is self-love, and we make a distinction. Entitlement is one. Selfishness, many times, people think I can't focus on myself because that's selfish. And
Yes.
that's actually not the case at all. When we start to focus on ourselves, we're able to help other people in a better way too. So we're more capable, more balanced, more aware, and we can be a better friend, partner, parent, what have you, because of that.
Yeah.
So I thought it was really important to call out some of those things.
Yeah, I think that one was good. And there's another one you said, what was the third one? An excuse.
You gotta just call it out sometimes, right?
Yeah, I did laugh when I saw the heading of that one. Self-love's just an excuse. I thought that's great.
Listen, I'm really grateful that self-love is a more common discussion that it's ever been, I think. It's definitely not a new concept, but the wave and surge of people focusing on self-love is bigger than I've ever seen it before. And I am happy about that. But a lot of times it gets a little overextended. We've already talked about selfishness and entitlement. I think that an excuse is one too. I've heard people overindulging in something, saying, well, it's because I love myself. And then even morphs into that entitlement aspect that we were talking about. And that's quite dangerous. We're doing things to honor our worth, but we're not using that as an excuse to then step away from our responsibilities, from being accountable in our interpersonal reactions and relationships. So we have to be really careful there, as you want to honor our worth, but also not to a fault that we're now living in some sort of self-care bubble.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. It's a fill up your own cup so then it can actually overflow to those we love.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that section. And the other one that I've marked off is the part on mindfulness. I really love that bit too. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Sure. So mindfulness, actually, I mentioned to you that when I developed the workbook, it was part from a personal journey, research experience, and also seeing a lot of what my clients were dealing with in mental health therapy sessions. And I realized that what a lot of my clients were benefiting from was adopting more of a mindful approach in their life in general. So many times we are so engulfed by the past, or we are already jumping ahead into the future, and we're kind of missing a presence and being an observer in our own lives, being active and engaged in our own lives. So I realized that that would be a really important practice that is self-loving as well. And that's actually why it was in there as an activity, of realizing how that it's a simple activity to, sometimes it's hard to understand the concept of mindfulness, but it's one of the simplest strategies to apply with self-love, because it doesn't cost a thing.
Yeah.
And even if you're short on time, giving yourself 5 minutes of mindfulness could make a difference.
Yeah.
That's why it's one of my favorite strategies in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of my favorite bits in that book, is that part.
Oh,
yeah.
good.
Lovely.
Good.
It's really lovely.
Good.
So can I ask you, do you see people online, or do you see people just face to face in person?
So I see most of my clients in traditional talk therapy in person.
Yeah.
However, I am licensed in the state of Florida, so I do see clients through online sessions as well. But because of licensure requirements, I can only see clients in Florida.
Oh, okay.
I know.
Wow.
I know. Yeah. So that's something actually at my role as a mental health advocate. You were asking a little bit earlier about my doctoral degree. That is in counselor education. So I not only, before this workbook, I was already teaching counselors how to become counselors. So counselor trainees, how to be therapists. But also I realized that mental health and self-love, these concepts, I'm kind of preaching to the choir, so to speak, when I'm teaching someone who's enrolled in a counseling program to be a therapist, versus we all need that knowledge, don't we? So that's also a part of where the Self Love Workbook came from. And it's one of my hopes to advocate for that we can utilize how fast technology is growing in terms of online therapy, and that we can improve some of these license and certification processes, that if someone is really wanting to work on self-love and mental health in London, that they could be able to work with me ethically and effectively too. It's one of my hopes for mental wellness on a global scale.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I didn't realize there was those restrictions.
Yeah.
For now.
It does tend to vary. Yeah, for now. I think it does tend to vary per country. But I know here in the States, it's a hot topic because, people might find me, and this has happened before, especially with the workbook, people might find me, and that feeling that connection with the provider is very important. But then there's the hurdle of being able to provide that service. So I'm hoping that changes in the future.
Can I ask, Shainna, where are you actually born?
So I'm actually from New York.
Yeah.
So I live in Central Florida now, but I'm from Long Island, New York. I was born in Queens and raised in Long Island. But ethnicity-wise, both of my parents are Guyanese. So we have mostly Indian ancestry, thanks to 23andMe. Now I know that for 100% sure, most of my heritage. So we are Indo-Caribbean mostly, a little bit of other stuff, but that's predominantly my ancestry.
Wow, lovely. Lovely. It's so wonderful, like interviewing people from all over the world, because you could be, I interviewed a woman yesterday or the day before, and she was, Irish, but she was in Spain. And then the next person's, from the US, but they're in Germany. Like, we're all kind of everywhere. It's fabulous. It's fabulous.
Which is why I think, we were talking about being able to provide services. I think that our requirements need to step up with how global our whole lives are, like even just people, moving in different places, but even the connectivity that I can chat with you today.
I know, that's so brilliant, isn't it? I just, I think YouTube's only been around 10 years.
And it's grown so much in that time.
It certainly has. And Instagram was after YouTube, I think. So
I believe you're right.
Yeah. So we will be putting your Instagram details down below and other bits and pieces for people that want to talk to you. I want to also ask you okay, I'll go back a step.
Okay.
There are people on YouTube saying that if you want to create and manifest stuff, you don't have to do self-love. So I'm a big disagreeer of that. But what do you think?
I guess as the author of the Self Love WorkBook,
Yeah.
you probably could guess that
Yes.
I disagree with that too.
Mm.
Here's the thing. I've also been fascinated by people who believe they don't need self-love. And we were talking about before the definition of self-love. And sometimes I worry we're not working with the same definition when someone says, I definitely don't need that. And then there's kind of the question of how do you know if you don't need it?
Yes.
Right? So if you're getting by, congratulations to you. That's a hardship in my eyes. But if you're getting by, that's great. But
yeah,
how do you know that's not actually going to help you? So that's one of those questions that I always have sitting in that way. But I have to tell you that in my personal experience, I was getting by. I really was. But I didn't know what I didn't know, right? So when I started to learn about self-love, it really opened my eyes to, it's kind of like I'm only, traveling by horse when I could travel with a car. Like you realize how it changes your mind in that way. So I think that it could be that many people who don't agree with it are either working with the wrong definition. Maybe their definition might not align with the ones that you and I might use, or they're getting by, so they think I don't need it. But when you open your mind up to the concept of self-love, I really haven't seen anyone not benefit from it. So that's why I get stumped there. I don't believe that everybody fits in the same box in any facet of life. But so I'm not saying that those people don't exist. It's just I have yet to see it. I have yet for someone to say that I tried self-love, I really understand the concept, work with the same definition that I'm working with, and that it either didn't help, or I've never heard anyone say to date that it's made their life worse in any way.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, interesting thought though.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, I was a bit surprised when I heard that, because it was, when you're using the law of attraction or using your imagination to visualize or all these things, the comments have been made, well, you can do all the imaginal stuff, you don't need to do the self-love. It's like, well, yes, you can do just that, but if you're using, let's use a relationship for example, people imagine being with somebody, they imagine having a great relationship, they imagine connecting, having romantic dinner, whatever they want to imagine. But if you're going in needy and trying to suck love out of somebody like they're your oxygen tank, your dinner is probably going to be short-lived.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And that is kind of along the lines of what I was saying is maybe that you could manifest that to a certain degree. Yes. But then there's still going to be a problem after that.
That's it.
That you will still have to kind of perpetuate in that way. So you might find that relationship and it may feel right, but then from investing in the relationship, or maybe from not investing if you're not practicing self-love, I don't know what's really going on there. But eventually I think it catches up.
I do too. And I think, I mean, I see a lot of people that do the law of attraction, imagining, manifesting, conscious creation, all this stuff, and they might catch the person into the net. But when you don't do the self-love and your neediness comes up and you start seeing them as your oxygen tank of love again, eventually they go, oh, I want to get away from you, because you suffocate them and you're an energy drain. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that I really love about self-love. Many times we see it as an independent, isolated journey. I mentioned before that many people see it as selfish because they see it that way, is that it kind of cuts you off from other people.
Yeah.
But I do believe it's twofold. So when you are working on yourself, you can be a better partner and you can receive in a better way too. You
Yes.
mentioned the concept of being needy. If you are able to, for example, there's a big emphasis in the workbook on emotions and emotional intelligence and awareness. If you're able to recognize and regulate your emotions effectively, then it doesn't mean you can't share your emotional experiences with a partner, for example, but you can share with them without overbearing them.
Yes.
There's more of a healthy discourse that occurs there. Then in the reverse, if you can manage your own emotions, when somebody comes to you because they're in need, you can manage your own emotions, but you also have some left over from your cup, right?
Yeah.
That you can now help them in that way. And to me, that's a healthy relationship. So self-love, I find to be essential in a healthy relationship of any sort, whether it's a romantic relationship, familial, friendship, across the board. Self-love has seemed to help for relationships.
Yeah. Can I ask you, with you, what would be your daily, if you could use the word daily or weekly, self-love routine that you love, stuff that you love to do on a regular basis?
Sure. So I have to admit, and people have laughed at me for this, but I do use the workbook.
Yeah.
That's not it probably sounds odd that I would use the workbook, but remember where it came from, right? I was doing these little activities first for myself.
Yes.
And then I realized there was a place in therapy. So, okay, this might benefit other people, but it did start with my own journey. Pretty much at least half of those activities started from something I was doing with myself first.
Yep.
Then with the literature and my experiences in therapy, helping others, that all kind of amassed from there. But it did start with my activities. So I do use the workbook. So I'll share that first.
That's great.
I think by definition, though, it is important to also recognize the difference between self-care and self-love. So the way I see it, self-care is an aspect of self-love. And those are the kind of things that are easy to do in routine form. So for example, I make sure that I mentioned that I'm a therapist. So when I have a difficult session, there are certain coping skills that I make sure I use immediately as self-care, but because I'm also honoring my role as a therapist in their lives. So I use that to get myself back to equilibrium. So that's a very specific example. But self-care strategies are more of behavioral things that you can do. So therefore that could be done more routinely. Whereas self-love, I do believe this tends to fluctuate based on where we are at in our lives currently, the context of the days that we have within that week. Mm-hmm. So I would actually say that my self-love is not as routine. Okay. But what I do that is routine is the intention of checking in and making time for self-love. So that looks different from day to day, but the self-care is more routine, whereas the self-love is setting the intention that I check in with my self-love daily. Every single day. This is very much a practice what you preach approach for me. Yeah. I'm not just telling people about it because I think it's neat. It really is a lifestyle for me. So I truly invest in my self-love in some capacity every single day.
Nice. Mm-hmm. I like how you separated the self-love and self-care, because it is, very much two different things. And there's the physical, the mental, the emotional. What do you do in all those different areas?
Exactly. And I don't think that you could do the same thing every week. I'm not sure if I think that in terms of self-love, if that's possible. Now, there could be domains that you're tapping into every week, like the physical, emotional, like you're mentioning, great examples. But to do the exact same self-love strategy every week, I'm not sure if that's the best approach. It needs to be more of a test that you check in. Where am I at? What do I need? What are my strengths? Where are my opportunities to grow? And theoretically, that would actually change every single week. So, but checking in, that could be the consistent approach.
Okay. When you say checking in, what do you do to check in?
Yeah. So for me, now that I have practiced this for quite some time and I am thorough on the different facets of self-love, which the model is in the workbook, but anywhere between self-awareness through self-care, self-esteem, self-growth, 7 different areas, I actually just ask myself, where are you right now in terms of your self-love? And because I've explored those different realms, it's easy for me to kind of attune to, you're lacking in your self-care today, but your self-esteem is healthy. So I
Mm.
kind of do it as like a monitoring test. I check in on the different realms.
Yeah.
But I would say for someone who's more starting out, you might need something more specific. So for example, you mentioned that you're working on the workbook about an hour a day. So that means there's probably a chapter that you're in. So that might be the focus of your life right now, of checking in specifically on that chapter of self-love, whether it's
Mm.
self-esteem, self-exploration, whatever it is. But you can always do something specific, or you could do it more broad. But I do prefer a broad approach because it allows me to really scan through my life, pay attention to my feelings, recognize what I'm going through, where I need to go. And that's actually worked for me.
Good stuff. Wow. So when did you start all this? When did this begin? How old were you? I mean,
I'm sorry?
how old were you when you started this
I
whole
was
self-love journey?
this has all encompassed my last decade, I would
Okay.
say. I really wish I could tell you that I learned about self-love when I was in grade school and that I practiced it throughout my life, but I didn't learn about it until when I was at university and I was starting to go into my mental health career. That was when the concept even came up to me. And at the time, that was more of the concept of self-care, that I made that nuance difference before. It wasn't even the broader concept of self-love. But I have to tell you, as soon as I learned about the concept, it stuck to me so fast. So that was my early 20s. And I stuck to me so fast because it was a light bulb moment. It made so much sense to me. And then I just started to apply it. And I couldn't imagine my life without it now,
Yeah.
actually. It's actually interesting to think about who I was back then when I started my journey. And while I'm a ways in, I do believe that self-love is a lifelong journey. So I'm excited about where I will go with it. But within these last 10 years or so, I mean, it's been an amazing journey. I can't even imagine what it's going to be like in the next 10 years. So there's that.
I remember, Shainna, when I was 17, my mum used to listen to Louise Hay.
Oh, wow.
And that was my first introduction to self-love, because she's really the godmother of self-love. I mean, it started so long
she's
ago.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So that was, and I ended up, I got a tumor at 27, 28. I had a tumor. And that's when I had to, I used to roll my eyes when my mum used to listen to that. And then when I got the tumor, I thought, hang on a minute, let me go back and listen to that now. So that's how it was life-changing for me. I mean, I dissolved the tumor in about 6 to 8 weeks, and then it never came back. So it was a very good experience very early. And I'll never forget it, because it was the bouncing. That was my light bulb moment, was then.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that these light bulb moments, whether it's self-love or whether it is a relationship ending or a tumor or, losing a job, all of these areas at that time, that is obviously difficult to endure. But one of the paths in self-love that I believe is important is being able to find some of the goodness and even the bad, so even in that, look how resilient you clearly are, that you opened your mind and heart to the practice of self-love at that time, and it helped you to heal, so who knows, would you have encountered that? Would you have then looked back into Louise Hay, who was technically introduced to you years prior? Who knows?
Exactly.
So I love that, when things are going good, self-love is important. But when we are also experiencing difficult times, self-love is crucial.
Yes. Yes, I agree. And it's like you've got this little toolbox that you can go to.
Yes,
And you can say, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. That's always why when I say sometimes when things are going well, we actually tend to neglect our self-love because we think there's some sort of gauge process. I'm doing well enough, therefore I don't need self-love. But that's the time that you actually have to invest. So you're putting all the things into your toolbox that you're ready for them, you're replenished, your cup is full. So when you need it, you're ready, you're prepared.
Yes, yes, definitely.
Mhm.
Have you read the book Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It?
I have not.
Ah, that's another, well, you can read that book in an hour. It's so thin. But that was another amazing, that
Yeah,
was another whole amazing self-love
good.
book. So yeah, I mean, it's so great that so many of you are writing.
Yeah. Well,
Like
I
you
think
said,
that's
more now, like you said, more now in the last 2 or 3 years, it's kind of igniting a lot more.
absolutely. And I think there's a lot of wonderful authors out there writing about their lived experience with self love and writing more books, which is why I took that very specific workbook approach.
Mm.
Because I had a lot of feedback and I was thinking about my clients kind of working with me in more of a, I'm sorry, did I lose you for a second?
Just for a sec, I
Yeah.
could hear you.
Okay.
But yeah, all good.
Okay, you can hear me. I'm sorry about that. I was thinking about how this interactive approach had worked so well for my clients working with me and how these engaging type activities work directly for me as well. And I thought, wow, there's already a lot of these books out there, but what people seem to be missing is more of a practical approach.
Yes.
Is, okay, so the book was really created with the idea of the person who says, okay, I believe I need self-love, but where do I start?
Mm.
That was really what it was for. It can be really helpful for someone who's already been on the self-love journey, or someone who has no idea about self-love, but it was really created for this person who's ready and wanting to delve in, but doesn't have any of the resources or guidance on to how to delve in.
Mm.
So that's why in the book, you might notice that I suggest a few things, but I always say, go back to your definition of self-love, make sure you know what's right for you, use it in your own way, make it your own, change things up, add things, remove things, but at least it's a resource there. So when you say, okay, I'm low on self-love, I need to practice, then pull out the workbook. That's at
Yeah,
least something to do.
exactly. Exactly. And it's, yeah, like you say, when you're reading a book, it's very different to actually doing it yourself. It's like you've
Yeah.
got, knowledge is one thing, it's application that gets you the results.
Yes. And
So,
for me personally, I didn't want it to be something that I experience a lot, even in therapy, is people say, well, you're the expert, tell me. And I do know a few things about mental health, and I do know a few things about self-love because I'm passionate about it and I've read the literature and I've lived through it. But I truly believe for the category of self-love that the only real expert is the person themselves. So take those resources, read the books, use the advice, listen to what works for a friend, but always come back to you because your compass in the process, that's what's going to guide you. So I was really careful about not wanting to say, this is what I did, so you better do it.
yes, yes.
I want no one to ever fit themselves in a box, but I say,
Mm.
hey, this helped for me. It's helped for a few people. Maybe it'll help for you too. Give
Yeah.
it a shot, but also alter it to meet your unique needs too, because I
Mm.
feel like honoring our individuality and our autonomy is an empowering aspect in self-love.
For sure, for sure. This is so wonderful. So wonderful. I just get excited. And I've been sitting down. I've got my partner's been away for a few days, so whenever he goes away for work, I go, okay, I'm going to do my self-love book because I need to uninterrupted time. So I light my candle and I wait till it's getting a little bit dark. So it's right at that quiet time of the day, because I work from home. I just block off some time at the end of the day where I'm not working with anyone, and I sit and it's like a little ritual, and it's such a wonderful thing to do at the end of the day, you know, not too late so that you can't think because you're too tired, but right where it's around dinner time, 6, 7 p.m., and just to have that hour where you just work and reflect on you. And it's emotional, mental, spiritual time for the self. And I cannot recommend it enough. I think it's an absolutely wonderful book. So thank you for writing it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you for those kind words. You know, I have to say, I also agree with you, which is funny. I also, when I'm practicing self-love, I found that like that dusky time of day, I don't know what it is about that, but for me, that works best too.
Yeah.
But this is a wonderful example, and why everyone needs to assess for themselves what works, because you and I are both agreeing there. But I have to tell you, I've heard a lot of people say that first thing in the morning. Is there time for self-love and reflection? And I do a lot of intention setting in the morning, but I just found that nighttime dusky time is the best time for me. So this is a good example actually, and why we should take the strategies we hear, but also know when to sort and know what's right for ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. Last question or little section.
Yeah.
When you are working with people on the self-love and they're having relationship issues, how do you bridge those two things?
Yeah, this is a wonderful question. So I always believe in self-love first. However, when you are actively in a relationship that you care about your partner very much, it's not as simple as saying, pause this relationship, let me go work on my self-love and come back. But this is why I always emphasize this, because even in long-term relationships that have been committed for a long time, I still think you have to make sure you prioritize self-love to invest in that relationship. And I was mentioning that before with the ebb and flow of your needs. Now, I will say that when, especially for clients that come in, when there's an interpersonal problem, whether that is a romantic relationship, friendship, what have you, I always have the person assess first for their self-love. Not just because it comes first, but in the dynamic of a relationship, the only person that you can truly manage is yourself. So at least it helps you to reflect on, how can I be more aware? How can I be more accountable? Where is my room for growth in this relationship? And sometimes this is a really hard prompt to ask people in couples that are experiencing turmoil of, well, it's obvious it's her fault because she is leaving me. She's the one that wants to leave me, so it's her fault, right? But relationships take two, and we can't really account for the other person we want to work with, but we cannot control the other person. So it's always helpful to kind of assess in any terms of interpersonal concerns to say, what can I do about this? What's the work that I can contribute first to myself, but also to this relationship? So it's always easier when the person is either not in a relationship or their relationship is stable. And it's difficult to volley when someone is in an interpersonal relationship that there's conflict and they're lacking self-love. These two things often come together, and that's so difficult to work with. But I like to use a back and forth process in that of saying, okay, but how do we manage for you? And if we boost your self-love, how does that impact the relationship? And then it tends to go from there.
Yeah. I agree.
Good.
I agree. Oh, it's wonderful. It really, I find like the more you work on your self-love, the more the relationship issues, problems take care of themselves, because you're no longer trying to, like you say, blame. They're not doing the right thing. They're not pulling their weight. They did this to me. It's like, well, you're the common denominator because you're here too. So you've got to, you've got to sweep your side of the street. So it really is. If you can do the self-love and really look at what you've got going on, the relationship just improves. I mean, I've used myself as my own guinea pig in that area and can see, over the years, my 20s and 30s and 40s, and I'm in my 50s now. So it really is something that you do see when you've done it wrong so many times, that you're always there when it's going wrong, that you are the common denominator.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because we've talked about it, and I'm glad you mentioned that, recognizing our own self-awareness and accountability helps us in a relationship. And I think it's important to recognize that it's not a checkbox, right? So for example, if we are dealing with an interpersonal problem in our romantic relationship, we go back, we work on our self-love, and we check the box and now move on and move forward. It's this ongoing process of that, of making sure that we care for ourselves in order to care for the other person. And it just continues. Both of them feed each other in that way, in a wonderful upward spiral.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Something I make this remark many times, and at first it came from slight humor, and I'm like, I'm glad I can laugh about it, but I think it's the truth. I'm very sure that I wouldn't have met my husband if I didn't allow myself to love myself first. So it's something also of, even when you are not in a relationship, of instead of looking for that love elsewhere, seeing how you find it for yourself first. So you're not plugging someone into your puzzle, that even if something were wrong and, a relationship ends or something like that, that you would still be able to stand because you weren't over depending on anybody. Again, whether it's a relationship, parent, friend, whatever. And you have that sturdiness in your own sense of self as well.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Good conversation, Shainna.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me to talk about this.
Yes, well, we will put your bits and pieces down below. If you are free, can you answer some of the comments in the thread if you want to pop in from time to time once it's uploaded? And that's it.
That'd be great.
It. Yeah,
absolutely. And if anyone wants to, I appreciate you adding my information, because I take a lot of questions about self-love pretty much weekly through my Instagram. So that's another way, if people have general questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Excellent. That'll be wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, do you want to say goodbye to everyone, and then I'll say goodbye, and then we'll say goodbye in private?
Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you for everyone for watching. I want to wish everyone a best luck journey in your self-love process. Remember, it is an ongoing process. Please be patient with yourself. But thank you for having an open mind and heart in this conversation. And I hope you can continue that as you continue your self-love journey as well.
Lovely. Thank you, Shainna.
Thanks.
Well, everybody, I hope you've enjoyed our not little interview, but long interview about self-love. It definitely warrants a long amount of time, because I think it is one of the most important subjects of all. For those of you that are single, for those of you that have got something on the boil, or those of you that are in long-term relationships, I don't think it matters. I think this is the foundation of all. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you in the next YouTube.